From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power with David Weston.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York to our television and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. The big news in Washington today is what we're anticipating. We're going to have some statement, we're told, from the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, on the floor of the House of Representatives coming up shortly. We don't know what she's going to say. There's a lot of speculation, though. We're going to keep our eyes peeled for what exactly happens. We'll bring you that when it happens. But in the meantime, we're going to turn to somebody who knows everything that's going on in Washington. He's our Washington correspondent, Joe Matthew, host of Sound On, weekdays on Bloomberg Radio. Joe, thanks for being with us. So set the stage for us. What is the speculation, at least, about what might happen with the Speaker today?
Well, there is a thought that this could be the end of her career, either as Speaker or as a member of the House of Representatives. And there's been a lot of talk about this going back months and months. David, she's frequently asked about it. She never answers the question, is very careful to dance around this, whether it's in an interview or in a news briefing. Her staff has been very buttoned up about it. But I do urge people to recall, in 2018, Nancy Pelosi pledged to serve only 4 more years, up to 4 years as a speaker, in an effort to quell an uprising among young Democrats. Also, the recent attack on her husband, Paul Pelosi, has added some complexities to this decision, as she told CNN in a recent interview.
And Joe, I'm sorry to interrupt you. This is Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, just going to the podium in the House of Representatives.
The House will be in order. The House will be in order. The prayer will be offered by our chaplain, Chaplain Kibben.
Would you pray with me? Today, O God, we lay before you our petitions, prayers.
I feel a little badly interrupting a prayer, but now we're having a prayer to open the session in the House of Representatives. The Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, has gone up to the podium, and we're covering it every second of it we can because it is anticipated possibly Nancy Pelosi might step down. So give us a sense, if we know, Joe, who's advising her what. I'm told the President of the United States, Joe Biden, is urging her to stay.
Yeah, look, this is something that's been batted around by Democrats a lot. This is a speaker with an incredible track record, an historic role in Congress, and a history of getting things done for this president, not to mention prior Democratic presidents. So there is some concern here, but there are also a lot of younger members in waiting. Hakeem Jeffries of New York is one of them, as this trinity of leadership here, from Pelosi to Jim Clyburn and Steny Hoyer, are getting up there in age. And there is a thought, as we heard repeatedly on the midterm campaign trail, that it's time for new leadership. As I mentioned, the attack on Paul Pelosi recently was something that helped her inform her decision. She mentioned that recently in a CNN interview. And David, this comes after the news last night. Republicans got the House. We have to announce the news here as well. 8 days after the midterm elections, they actually got it done. 7 days after Kevin McCarthy claimed victory in the House. It was a seat in California, the 27th district. Mike Garcia, the Republican, wins in an upset. That gives Republicans the 218 seats needed to control the chamber.
Okay, Joe, thank you so very much. We're going to keep our eyes peeled now on what's going on in the House of Representatives as Nancy Pelosi is speaking once again.
The journal stands approved. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson.
And now we'll go to the Pledge of Allegiance. In the meantime, we want to bring in somebody who knows Speaker Pelosi terribly well. He's Tim Romer. He's the former congressman from Indiana and then went on to be U.S. Ambassador to India. He is now an executive director at APCO. So, Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for being with us. As I say, you've known Nancy Pelosi a long time.
Yes, we have known each other going back to 1990, served on the Intelligence Committee together. I helped whip and get votes for her to eventually become Speaker of the House. I've worked on a lot of legislation with her, and we've talked about foreign policy when I was ambassador to India, China, human rights, all kinds of different things. I know her, I know Paul, I know the family very well.
So put her speakership in the broader historical perspective, if you want. She was, after all, the first, and by the way, the second woman Speaker of the House, which was historic when it happened.
Well, I would say, David, we are going to be listening in a couple moments to the most powerful woman in the history of the United States of America, and maybe the best Speaker of the House in the 245 years of our history. The consequences here, her impact on American society has been difficult to measure. I remember hearing one time from her something her dad told her. Her dad was in politics, of course, in Maryland. And he said, no one's going to give you power. You have to seize it. And Nancy Pelosi has gone after power and used it in good ways, used it in successful ways to implement things, to get things passed through Congress and to the White House, to make consequential decisions on American foreign policy, to help pass in the last few years some of the most consequential legislation in the past 100 years involving rebuilding the middle class and trying to get us out of the COVID crisis, and now investing in the chip and computing industry to bring jobs back home across the great Midwest and across the United States. It is a significant talk we're going to hear. I don't know if she's going to carve out a new role for herself and stay in politics. I don't know if she's going to go into the private sector, or maybe there's a hybrid. Maybe she'll become ambassador to Italy, but still be involved as an advisor in U.S. and Democratic politics.
Yeah, Ambassador.
You never know.
Yeah, absolutely right. And you know her so well. Ambassador Romer, it strikes me she does have an extraordinary track record of legislation she got done when she was Speaker of the House. She also, though, served as the minority leader for a time. She left being Speaker of the House and came back. Talk about her as the leader of the, as it were, opposition, because whoever is the next Speaker, whether Nancy Pelosi continues or I'm sorry, whoever is going to be the next Speaker, there's going to be a minority leader now in the House, not a Speaker of the House who is Democrat. What does she teach us, or what should she accomplish as the leader of the opposition in the House of Representatives?
Well, I think one of the great skills that she brings, David, is listening to the members of Congress. I happen to be a more conservative or moderate Democrat coming from Indiana. And I can tell you she always listened to me and respected the views of people in our caucus, our Democratic caucus, that is very wide and deep and diverse, and would try to listen to all 218 of us or 235 of us, whatever the majority would be, or to your question, the minority, and try then to formulate policy that she strategized on that would be effective at the end of the day, that could get through the House, get through the Senate, be signed by the president, and be consequential and impactful to America and to the people who lived here. Her ability to listen and then legislate and then get things passed and implement them is extraordinary.
So, Mr. Ambassador, it strikes me you have a lot of experience inside the House of Representatives. Give us your take on the dynamics going forward, because although the Republicans will be the majority, it will be a very slim margin. What does that do to moderates, whether Democrats or Republicans, in terms of their ability to influence things in the House?
Well, we've seen, David, what a moderate Democrat like Joe Manchin has been able to do in the Senate with a one-vote margin there. As this margin has shrunk in the House of Representatives, it can potentially empower some of those moderates on the Democratic side and on the Republican side to work together. And many of those moderates got reelected. Some of the superstars on the Democratic side, Elise Slotkin from Michigan, Sharice Davids from Kansas, Abigail Spanberger from Virginia, great thinkers, legislators, people who are stars of the bench of the Democratic Party. These are moderates that could potentially go and work with people on the Republican side to either make a Speaker McCarthy's life miserable or a minority leader on the Democratic side very interesting, exciting, and make them more prevalent and more powerful in a very, very closely divided House of Representatives.
And finally, Mr. Investor, we've been talking about legislating, affirmative legislation. What about investigations? Because now that the Republicans will be, albeit in a slim majority, as I understand it, they have a lot more power to investigate, and we've heard a lot from various Republicans about all the things they want to investigate.
Yes, David, that's one of the key accomplishments of the Republicans taking over the House of Representatives. Whether they win by 1 vote or 10 votes, they then have the gavel and then they can investigate. I think it's going to be a profound effect on foreign policy and on domestic policy. One thing what will happen is they're going to start investigating things such as the Afghanistan withdrawal that President Biden oversaw. They're going to look more closely at China and maybe the origins of COVID. They probably are going to inflame the rhetoric even more on China. They may have a Speaker McCarthy, if he wins and prevails, possibly visit Taiwan and therefore bring the U.S.-China friction to an even higher level. They may go after Hunter Biden and investigate some of his past. So even if they can't legislate, their power to investigate is very powerful on politics. And does that completely take legislating off the table? Do we immediately go into 2024 politics? If that's the case, and we can't even get maybe some of the smaller things through that I know President Biden would like to work with moderate Democrats and Republicans to still legislate for the next 2 years.
Okay, Mr. Messer, always a pleasure to have you with us, and particularly today. It's been very, very helpful. That's Tim Romer. He's the former Democratic congressman from Indiana and, of course, former U.S. ambassador to India. Coming up, we're going to talk about the state of the British economy and in its economic relations with the United States, with British ambassador to the United States, Dame Karen Pierce. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. We're going to keep our eyes on the House of Representatives in case and when Nancy Pelosi steps up to tell us her intentions. But in the meantime, there's been some big news in the United Kingdom today as the new government there brought forward its autumn statement, I believe it's called, which basically outlined the new economic plans that they have. And to take us through those and exactly what lies behind them, we welcome now Dame Karen Pierce. She is the British ambassador to the United States. So Dame Karen, thank you so much for being with us. Give us your take, and perhaps as important, what you would like us Americans to understand from what we saw and heard today.
Well, thank you very much, David. I think the really key message is that this budget is about stability, it's about fairness, and it all leads to growth. So there are spending restraints, spend to invest, and also revenue-raising measures. The poorest in society are cushioned. The tax increases will mainly be borne by high earners. And we have put at benefits and frozen tax thresholds below the highest, and we're investing over $700 billion in things like nuclear energy, transport infrastructure, and also digital. So it really is heading for growth, but as the Chancellor and PM make clear, they want to stabilise the economy first. We'd love to work with our American friends. Britain remains a fantastic place for American companies to invest. You know, every day something like 1.7 million Brits go to work for American companies in the UK, and 1.2 million Americans work for British companies in the US. So the more investment we can do in each other's economies, the better for everyone.
Dame Karen, as we watch the economy over there, you have challenges. We all do, but the UK right now has particular challenges with inflation that, if anything, is worse than it is in the United States, and some challenges to growth. That is, after all, why the last mini-budget came out, understandably, to get some growth. I wonder what can be done for the British economy to help on that, and is there any role the U.S. could play in that? For example, with trade agreements, which I understand were not raised at G20.
I understand that's the case as well, but the Prime Minister and President Biden had a very warm conversation about a whole range of issues, from Ukraine through to the economy, and supporting each other on supply chains. I think that's the key thing, to get some agreements going on the deepening of supply chains so that we can help each other and our European partners and G7 partners be more resilient. So I'd put that quite high up. Yes, UK inflation is higher than in the States. And as you know, David, the two economies operate a little bit differently. But I would say we're very much in the middle of the G7 pack when it comes to inflation. Some of our European partners have higher inflation. And the government's mini budget that you heard today, the government statement, is absolutely designed to get inflation down. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, he made that very clear when he was presenting his measures to Parliament. Inflation distorts everybody's economy, nation's economy, households' economy, and he wants to get it down. There is special help on the energy side for households to help with the energy bills, and that will increase from next April.
Madam Ambassador, what about Europe and relations, economic relations between UK and Europe? Obviously, there was Brexit. At the same time, it is, I believe, still by far your largest trading partner. Are there things that can be done there to facilitate maybe some of the supply chains, for example, you described?
Well, that's a very good question, and it is something we talk to our European as well as our US partners about. And a lot of work on supply chains is being done through the G7. I mean, one thing that has come out of the pandemic, but also out of the consequences of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, is very much the G7 working much more closely together on the economic side. And we are looking precisely at those questions.
Dave and Karen, thank you so much for being with us. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we now are going to go to the House of the floor of the House of Representatives and the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi.
The first time I saw the Capitol. It was on a cold January day when I was 6 years old. My father, Thomas D'Alessandro Jr., was about to be sworn in for his 5th term in Congress, representing our beloved hometown of Baltimore. I was riding the car with my brothers, and they were thrilled and jumping up and down and saying to me, Nancy, look, there's the Capitol. And every time I'd say, I don't see any Capitol. Is it a capital A, a capital B, or a capital C? And finally, I saw it. A stunning white building with a magnificent dome. I believed then, as I believe today, this is the most beautiful building in the world because of what it represents. The Capitol is a temple of our democracy, of our Constitution, of our highest ideals. On that day, I stood with my father on this floor as he took a sacred oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. All of us who have served in this House have taken the hallowed oath of office. And it is the oath that stitches us together in a long and storied heritage. Colleagues who served before us are all our colleagues. Colleagues like Abraham Lincoln, Daniel Webster, Shirley Chisholm, Patsy Mink, and our beloved John Lewis. Personally, it binds me as a colleague to my father, a proud New Deal congressman and one of the earliest Italian Americans to serve in the Congress. And this is an oath we are duty-bound to keep, and it links us with the highest aspirations of the ages. In this room, our colleagues across history have abolished slavery, granted women the right to vote, established Social Security and Medicare, offered a hand to the weak, care to the sick, education to the young, and hope to the many. Indeed, it is here, under the gaze of our patriarch, George Washington, in the People's House, that we have done the people's work. My colleagues, I stand before you as Speaker of the House, as a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a devout Catholic, a proud Democrat, and a patriotic American, a citizen of the greatest republic in the history of the world. Which President Lincoln called the last best hope on earth. Indeed, in the words attributed to another of our colleagues, the legendary Daniel Webster, he said, "Hold on, my friends, to the Constitution of your country and the government established under it. Miracles do not cluster. That which has happened but once in 6,000 years cannot be expected to happen often." Indeed, American democracy is majestic, but it is fragile. Many of us here have witnessed its fragility firsthand, tragically, in this chamber. And so democracy must be forever defended from forces that wish it harm. Last week, the American people spoke, and their voices were raised in defense of liberty, of the rule of law, and of democracy itself. With these elections, the people stood in the breach and repelled the assault on democracy. They resoundingly rejected violence and insurrection, and in doing so, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there.
For our Bloomberg television and radio audience, we are listening to Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, speaking from the floor of the House of Representatives.
And now we owe to the American people our very best to deliver on their faith, to forever reach for the more perfect union, the glorious horizon that our founders promised. The questions before this Congress and in this moment are urgent. Questions about the ideals that this House is charged by the Constitution to preserve and protect. Establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Our posterity, our children. Babies born today will live into the next century, and our decisions will determine their future for generations to come. While we will have our disagreements on policy, we must remain fully committed to our shared fundamental mission, to hold strong to our most treasured democratic ideals, to cherish the spark of divinity in each and every one of us, and to always put our country first. In their infinite wisdom, our founders gave us their guidance, e pluribus unum, from many one. They could not have imagined how large our country would become or how different we would be from one another. But they knew we had to be united as one. We the people, one country, one destiny. It has been with great pride in my 35 years in the House I have seen this body grow more reflective of our great nation, our beautiful nation. When I came to the Congress in 1987, there were 12 Democratic women. Now there are over 90, and we want more. The new members of our Democratic caucus will be about 75% women, people of color, and LGBTQ. And we have brought more voices to the decision-making table. When I entered leadership in 2002, there were 8 of us. Today, there are 17 members of the leadership. When I first came to the floor at 6 years old, Never would I have thought that someday I would go from homemaker to House Speaker. In fact, I never... In fact, I never intended to run for public office. Mommy and Daddy taught us through their example that public service is a noble calling and that we all have a responsibility to help others. In our family, my brother Tommy then became mayor of Baltimore also. But it's been my privilege to play a part in forging extraordinary progress for the American people. I have enjoyed working with 3 presidents, achieving historic investments in clean energy with President George Bush. Transformative health care reform with President Barack Obama. and forging the future, from infrastructure to healthcare to climate action with President Joe Biden. Now we must move boldly into the future, grounded by the principles that have propelled us this far and open to fresh possibilities for the future. Scripture teaches us that for everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven. My friends, no matter what title you all, my colleagues, have bestowed upon me, speaker, leader, whip, there is no greater official honor for me than to stand on this floor and to speak for the people of San Francisco. This I will continue to do as a member of the House, speaking for the people of San Francisco, serving the great state of California, and defending our Constitution. And with great confidence in our caucus, I will not seek re-election to Democratic leadership in the next Congress. For me, the hours come for a new generation to lead the Democratic caucus that I so deeply respect. And I'm grateful that so many are ready and willing to shoulder this awesome responsibility. Madam Speaker, standing here today, I'm endlessly grateful for all of life's blessings. For my Democratic colleagues whose courage and commitment with the support of your families have made many of these accomplishments possible. In fact, could not have been done without you. For my dear husband, Paul, who has been my beloved partner in life and my pillar of support, thank you. We're all grateful for all the prayers and well wishes as he continues his recovery. Thank you so much. Our darling children, Nancy, Corinne, Christine, Jacqueline, Paul, and Alexandra, and our grandchildren, Alexander and Madeline, Liam, Sean, and Ryan, Paul and Thomas, Bella and Octavio. They are the joys of our lives for whom and we are so very, very proud of them and a comfort to us at this time. And for my brilliant, dedicated, and patriotic staff, under the leadership of Terry McCullough, working together, the finest group of public servants the House has ever known. Thank you all so much. And again, for those who sent me here, for the people of San Francisco, for entrusting me with the high honor of being their voice in Congress. In this continued work, I will strive to honor the call of the patron saint of our city, St. Francis. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. In this house, we begin each day with a prayer and a pledge to the flag. And every day,
we have been listening to the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, addressing the House from the floor. And she went back really through her career, starting with her father, who was a Democratic mayor of Baltimore, also served in Congress, took it right up to the present day, and talked about the midterms and the extent to which the American people had stood up for democracy, also took pride in the extent to which the diversity in Congress had improved under her watch. But in the end, she said that she would not stand for re-election to the leadership from the House. And but although she would continue to represent her home district of San Francisco, there was a lot of standing ovations through there. Most of them, the Democrats were on their feet, not the Republicans, but there was a great moment of bipartisanship when she talked about her husband, Paul, who'd been viciously attacked, saying that she appreciated all the prayers and we all hoped for his safety, and all rose and stood and applauded for an extended period of time. To give us his reaction to this historic moment, we turn out to our Washington correspondent, Joe Matthew, host of Sound On weekdays on Bloomberg Radio. So, Joe, what is your reaction?
Pretty remarkable to see this, even though a lot of people thought it was coming here, David. To actually hear the Speaker make that announcement is remarkable. And clearly the House on both sides of the chamber taken by this, saying, for everything there is a season. Nancy Pelosi is the only woman ever elected to be Speaker of the House, and she was the Democratic House leader through various positions, as she described, for the better part of 2 decades. I will not seek re-election to the leadership is the statement here. She did not retire, though, and it's important to make that point, as you just did, David. The question is now who fills her shoes, and this will set off a leadership battle that will likely culminate with Hakeem Jeffries, the congressman from New York, stepping in for Nancy Pelosi.
And without naming names, she did endorse the people coming up. She said there's a strong bench behind her. So thank you so much to Joe Matthew. Really appreciate it. You can catch Joe again at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Sound On Bloomberg Radio. And now we turn to Democratic Senator from Colorado, Michael Bennett. So, Senator, we had all sorts of things to ask you about, but we have to start, of course, with Nancy Pelosi. It's the other side of the Capitol, but a fellow Democrat. What's your reaction to this historic speakership?
Well, thanks for having me. And she has been a historic speaker. She's an unbelievably dedicated public servant and a master legislator. And she was tough as nails. She has been tough as nails. And unlike some of the other people around this place, at least I never had the sense that Nancy Pelosi was in this for herself or in this for the power, but instead in it to make America a better place, especially for our children. She's been an incredible champion on the child tax credit, which we passed last year, which cut childhood poverty almost in half this country. And there's a long list of things that she's done. And then I think it's very impressive how she decided to go. You know, to everything there is a season. It's time for new leadership to rise in the House of Representatives, including my colleague from Colorado, Joe Neguse, who's running for one of those jobs. And I think that's a much better way of going out than some other choices people around here have made.
So, Senator, I'm curious, and it's early, but we do this in the media, is get too early in our projections. What of her legacy? Obviously, there's a lot of legislation that's on the books. It's signed, sealed, and delivered. But what about the things that haven't gotten done yet? What are the prospects in a now divided Congress, narrow majority for the Republicans on the House side? You're going to hold the majority in the Senate. What are the prospects for some of the important things that she didn't get done?
Well, I'm hopeful that we are going to continue to get things done. The last year and a half, we've had one bipartisan accomplishment after another, you know, working with Republican colleagues in the Senate and a Democratic House and President. You know, we passed the bipartisan infrastructure bill. We passed the bipartisan postal reform bill, the most significant increase in veterans' benefits in a generation, a bipartisan gun bill, the really important semiconductor legislation that's going to bring back semiconductor manufacturing from Southeast Asia to the United States. You know, that's a pretty good track record over the last 18 months, and I hope we're going to be able to continue to do that. And I hope that the House of Representatives will see the message that the American people sent very clearly last Tuesday, which is we want to put chaos in the rearview mirror. This is an election about progress, not about chaos, and Washington has the chance to deliver.
The business of the government goes on, even as we really want to reflect on Nancy Pelosi's tenure as Speaker. She's still Speaker, though, for this Congress. What is likely to be doable in the lame duck session, in your judgment?
Well, I'm hopeful that we can pass the National Defense Reauthorization Act. That's very important for us to do, especially with Putin's invasion of Ukraine. I hope that we can come to bipartisan agreement to extend the child tax credit. I've been working hard with Democratic and Republican colleagues to see if we can finally pass in the Senate the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, which our farmers and ranchers desperately need us to pass in this country because they're having so much trouble finding labor. Those are just a few things that I think we could address in this lame duck session and go out, in a really positive way.
What about the so-called Respect for Marriage Act, which, as I understand it, actually has made progress over on the Senate side, on your side?
It definitely has made progress. We're here today because there are folks that are trying to slow that process down, but I have no doubt that by the time this week is over, the Respect for Marriage Act will have passed the United States Senate and will be on its way to President Biden's desk for him to sign it. And I think that'll be a great day for America.
What about the debt limit? Because we're not up against it yet. We will be sometime in the middle of next year. Is it possible to resolve that in the lame duck?
I think it's unlikely that it's going to be resolved in the lame duck because things don't tend to get done around here until people's backs are against the wall. I, of course, have always said that the debt limit, represents not a fiscally responsible set of policies, but is a profound self-inflicted wound. David, you'll remember when our debt was downgraded because people in the House were horsing around with the debt limit. The debt limit's not about future debt. The debt limit is about debt this country has already incurred and that we have said we're going to pay it off. It's like, if you watch cable all month long, a premium set of premium channels all month long, cable company sends you the bill, and instead of paying it, you rip it up and throw it in the trash. We have to deal with the long-term fiscal issues in this country, but using the debt ceiling is, I think, as I said, just going to create self-inflicted wounds.
And finally, Senator Bennett, I want to come back to Nancy Pelosi. For those of us watching on TV, she's still on the floor. It looks like she's going to hug and have a conversation with every single member of the Democratic caucus. At least it's an extended period on the floor there. But one of the things she talked about was the midterms. And she talked about our democracy being majestic but fragile, a witness to the January 6th events. And she said that the American people had stood tall and really repelled some of the challenges of democracy. Where are we with our democracy right now, given the midterms and some of the challenges that we've had?
Yeah. I mean, I really agree that it is fragile. We have learned, I would say, with the election of Donald Trump, the January 6th invasion of the Capitol, how fragile it is. When you travel overseas, you hear people in democracies talk about the rise of political extremism and the difficulty of governing in a world where social media is driving us apart because of the algorithms they use to sell advertising. These are serious issues that our democracy is going to have to confront. But the American people saw through this hail of chaos and of money and all the rest of it. And I think they said, we want to vote for progress. We don't want to go back to chaos. We want to do something else. And the results in this midterm were extraordinary. They obviously were extraordinary for Democrats, but that's not the important part. They were extraordinary for the democracy. I was happy to see in Colorado, for example, large Republican counties where I could never imagine losing by fewer than 20 points. We lost those counties only by 7 points or 8 points. And I think that's a sign that Colorado wants us to turn the page on the Trump era and move the country forward. And who wouldn't be committed, really, to the future of our democracy? We have to come together as Americans to turn something over to our kids and to our grandkids that we can be proud of. And I think Tuesday night was a night that the American people said, we're going to underscore that and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that actually happens.
Okay, Senator Bennett, we really appreciate you being with us on this historic day. That's Michael Bennett. He's a Democratic senator from Colorado. Coming up, what economic help Ukraine needs in its war with Russia. We're going to talk with Ukrainian Minister of Finance, Serhiy Markhachuk. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. Even with all the developments in Washington today, obviously the war in Ukraine continues with increasing pressure on the Ukrainian government. To get a sense, particularly of the economic aspects of that pressure, we welcome now Serhiy Marchenko. He is the Ukrainian Minister of Finance. So, Mr. Minister, thank you so much for joining us. We focus a lot on the military aspects in Washington. We maybe don't focus as much on the economics. What does Ukraine need right now from the United States and from the West in terms of economics?
It's a good question. You know that we are on a huge deficit for this year. It's around $5 billion per month. Next year, deficit could be around $3 billion per month. And this is our key priority, how to find necessary concessional finance to cover our deficit. And again, during last months, we see that Russia destroyed our critical infrastructure, our energy infrastructure. So it's another means we find a way how to finance it, how to repair our critical infrastructure, especially in a way that's winter season, and we need to heat in our houses and need electricity.
So the numbers you just quoted in terms of how much per month you need, does that include the Russian devastation of the infrastructure there? Because that seems to be ramping up. We saw that just this week.
It's only budget needs I mentioned. Of course, it's necessary to calculate all our damages. It's not an easy because last time World Bank did a rapid damage assessment. It was 1st of August. Now it's a bigger amount. It could be estimated more than 100 billion per whole period. It should be more. But again, it's not easy to estimate the whole cost of damages because it's still running. Every day missiles attack destroy our critical infrastructure, but we keep repairing it because we believe that we can manage to do this, and we believe in the support of our countries which are eager to support Ukraine.
I know that the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, has been over there visiting. I assume that they're helping put together the package. Can you give us some sense of how the package comes together? What do various countries contribute? How does it happen? When do you get it?
Of course, predictability is important for us because this year we was fully uncertain when and how much we can receive from our supporters. Next year we would prefer to have bigger responsibility and to rely on some timely disbursement of support. Now we can respect the decision of EU, which would provide us 18 billion euro next year. Of course, it's the United States which also eager to support Ukraine. And again, you mentioned IMF. Now we are dealing with IMF mission. We try to construct a monitoring board program for Ukraine. It could be a bridge until bigger upper credit tranche program for Ukraine. So we have hope that we can manage and to fulfill all necessary structural and priority actions to be able to have necessary financing for next year.
Mr. Minister, I know that you're dealing with the Biden administration in terms of the United States support. At the same time, Congress is really important in that regard as well. Have you had any indications from it? Have you had any discussions with the Republicans in the House of Representatives? Because now we know they're going to be in the majority.
I think that both parties, Republicans and Democrats, are eager to support Ukraine. We don't split supporters of Ukraine because I truly believe that American nations is a great support of Ukraine. That's why we believe that Congress as well as Senate will be able to find a way how to support Ukraine.
Okay, Mr. Minister, I really appreciate you joining us today. It's a terribly important subject. That's Serhiy Marchenko. He's the Ukrainian Minister of Finance. Coming up, what comes next in the House of Representatives as it's narrowly controlled now by Republicans. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. We've spent much of today focused on Washington and in particular the House of Representatives, where the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, took to the floor to make an historic announcement that she would not stand for re-election to the leadership of the Democrats in the new Congress, although she would remain in Congress as a Democratic Congresswoman from San Francisco. To give us a sense of what this all may mean, we welcome now Emily Wilkins from Bloomberg Government. Okay, thanks so much for being here, Emily. First of all, your reaction, as I say, it's historic when Nancy Pelosi steps down.
It is an incredibly powerful moment. You saw that with the energy that was in the chamber while Pelosi was giving her speech. Not just Democrats, which came and packed their section of the room, but you also saw a number of Republicans, including the number 2 Republican, Steve Scalise, come applaud Pelosi for what she has done and the history. A lot of folks who I've talked to today say that this is an end of an era. I've even spoken with Republican Tom Cole, who said that even on the Republican side, there's sort of a range of feelings about Pelosi, from respected to grudgingly respected. So this is truly a huge, huge person that has been of much consequence and much power, now passing the torch to the next generation.
Well, exactly. I mean, a lot of reminiscences yet to come, a lot of celebrations, I'm sure, of her career. But, you know, the king is dead, long live the king. What comes next, Emily?
So we are hearing reports that we are expecting there's sort of been this next generation of leadership that's been waiting in the wings. One name you're going to start hearing a lot of is Hakeem Jeffries. He is currently poised to become the next leader of House Democrats, not Speaker, of course, because Democrats won't control the House, but he will be the minority leader. You're also going to see Congresswoman Kathleen Clark from Massachusetts, as well as Pete Aguilar from California, step up into some of those top leadership positions. You are going to see Pelosi leave leadership, as well as her current number 2 House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, but they will remain in Congress. And you're also going to see Jim Clyburn, a really powerful figure within the entire Democratic Party, really stay in leadership as assistant speaker and kind of guide that next generation of leadership through the next 2 years.
And Mr. Clyburn, obviously a close ally of Joe Biden, the President of the United States. Okay, so that's on the Democratic side. What are we looking at on the Republicans? I mean, I understand that Kevin McCarthy now has the nomination, although he has to get 218 votes in the new Congress.
And he doesn't have 218 yet. As many Republicans here will remind you, he's going to have to work for it pretty hard over the next couple weeks. Republicans are looking for him to kind of state a plan for what he wants to see with some of the big debates over the debt ceiling. That's a particular one that a lot of people are focused on. And just for caucus rules in general. I mean, remember, House Republicans, they have their own set of rules that govern them, kind of determine where the power is. A lot of Republicans say they want more power to the members. And you are seeing McCarthy really beginning to respond to that. But I think he's got a lot of work to do between now and January 3rd, in which there will be the formal vote that will either make him Speaker of the House or throw a very big surprising curveball for Republicans and Democrats alike.
Emily, almost without regard to who's leading on the two sides, what are we looking for in the new Congress now that the Republicans have a narrow majority?
Well, we knew from the start that if Republicans took over Congress, the thing they were going to focus on were investigations. I mean, we saw that today. Republicans held a huge press conference where they talked about Hunter Biden, looking into him, looking into his business dealings. We expect them to have investigations in regard to the origins of COVID-19, to the border, to really focus on Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. But to a certain extent, they are going to have to pass legislation. They will need to raise the debt ceiling. They will need to fund the government. And with the tight majorities that they have right now, expect those to be very big, very contentious debates when they arrive.
Well, one last one on that, because as you know, Bloomberg was reporting that some Republicans in the House earlier on were saying, yeah, on the debt ceiling, they're really going to hold that hostage to get some fundamental changes, for example, in Social Security. Given the narrowness of the majority, is that somewhat less likely?
I mean, Republicans know as well as Democrats what it means if America is not going to be able to raise the debt limit. And at least on that one, you do have a number of Democrats who could potentially cross the aisle and vote for something like that. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see whether Kevin McCarthy will be open to working with Democrats on that one. Certainly, they do want to get some wins, but this is going to be a really difficult thing for them to do.
Emily, thank you so much. That's Bloomberg Government's Emily Wilkins reporting from Capitol Hill. Check out the Balance of Power newsletter on the terminal and online. Coming up, Balance of Power is going to continue on Bloomberg Radio. And in our second hour, we're going to talk to former U.S. Ambassador to Poland, Daniel Fried, about Ukraine. This is Bloomberg.